cold wind blew across the stretch of asphalt, cutting through the vast, unbroken emptiness of the Nevada desert. The road was quiet, untouched by headlights or the hum of an approaching vehicle. The gas station at mile marker 67 stood alone, its neon open sign flickering weakly against the darkness, barely illuminating the cracked pavement outside. Inside, an old man sat behind the counter, his hands absently drumming against the surface, his weary eyes fixed on the empty highway beyond the window. Nina Castillo had been driving for hours, the glow of her dashboard clock reminding her just how late it had gotten. She was supposed to have stopped hours ago, but something about the endless, desolate road made it impossible to find a good place to rest. When her gas light flickered on, she let out a frustrated sigh, glancing at the GPS. The screen was frozen. No signal. Just ahead, the neon sign of the gas station cut through the darkness like a beacon. The moment she pulled up, an unnatural stillness settled over the air. The place felt too quiet, too empty, like something had been waiting for her to arrive. Stepping out of the car, she glanced around. No other vehicles, no movement, just the whisper of wind pushing loose sand across the pavement. The fluorescent lights flickered above her, casting long, shifting shadows against the ground. As she walked toward the entrance, she noticed the "Help Wanted" sign taped to the glass door. Beneath it, someone had scrawled in marker, "Do not stay past midnight." The old man behind the counter barely looked up as she entered. The place smelled faintly of motor oil and something metallic, something sour beneath the scent of stale coffee. She grabbed a bottle of water and made her way to the counter. "Clamp 6, she said, handing over her credit card. The old man took it without a word, his fingers trembling slightly as he swiped it. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry, as if he hadn't used it in hours. "You shouldn't be out here this late." Nina forced a tired smile. "Yeah, well, road trips don't always go as planned." The man's eyes flickered to the clock on the wall. 11:48 p.m. His fingers twitched as he handed back her card. "Make it quick," he murmured. Nina frowned but nodded, pocketing her card before heading outside. The pump was slow, the gas trickling into her tank with an agonizing sluggishness. She glanced at her phone. Still no signal. A sound. Soft, like footsteps crunching over gravel. Her breath hitched as she turned, scanning the area. The desert stretched out around her, vast and lifeless. Just as she exhaled, something flickered in the reflection of her car window, a shape moving near the gas station's roof. A dark figure, standing motionless. Her pulse jumped. She spun, but the roof was empty. Just the hum of the flickering light above. The pump clicked, signaling the tank was full. Heart pounding, she replaced the nozzle and slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. As she reached for the ignition, a voice made her freeze. "Leaving so soon?" A man stood just outside her window, his face partially obscured by the dark. His eyes gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. His smile stretched a little too wide. Nina's stomach twisted. She hadn't heard him approach. "Yeah," she said, forcing her voice to stay even. "Long drive ahead." The man tilted his head, studying her. Then he took a step closer. "You sure you don't want to stay? We've got rooms out back." Nina's fingers clenched around the steering wheel. "No, thanks." The man's grin didn't fade. Suit yourself." He stepped back, and without hesitating, Nina turned the key. The engine roared to life. She threw the car into gear, peeling out of the lot without a second glance. As she hit the highway, the gas station faded in her rearview mirror. Relief settled in her chest until she glanced at her GPS. The screen was still frozen. She looked up at the road and nearly screamed. The gas station was ahead of her. She slammed on the brakes, her tires screeching against the pavement. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. She had driven straight, hadn't she? She hadn't turned around. She swallowed, hands gripping the wheel. Maybe she had been more tired than she thought. Maybe she had lost track of where she was going. She shook her head, trying to steady her nerves. This time, she would keep her eyes on the road. No distractions, no glances at her phone. Taking a deep breath, she accelerated. 5 minutes passed. 10. She glanced up. The gas station was ahead of her. Nina's blood turned to ice. Her breath came out in shallow gasps. She slammed her hands against the wheel, trying to will herself to wake up from whatever nightmare this was. A sound, a whisper. She turned her head. Too fast. Something sat in her passenger seat. Not a person, a shape. Dark. Too tall, its limbs stretching unnaturally long. Its fingers drummed lightly against the dashboard. Her mouth opened to scream, but before she could, its head snapped toward her and she saw its face. It was her own, smiling. Her vision blurred. The road twisted. The car spun. Then, darkness. She woke to the sound of a familiar bell chiming overhead. Her body ached. Her head pounded. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. She was inside the gas station, back at the counter. The old man stared at her, his face pale. "You stayed past midnight," he whispered. The air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. Slowly, she turned toward the glass door. The "Do not stay past midnight" sign was gone. In its place, written in thick black ink, "No point." The road stretched endlessly before Nina Castillo, a cracked ribbon of asphalt cutting through the desert's endless void. The gas station was long behind her, but its presence clung to her like an oil slick, thick and suffocating. She could still hear the old man's whisper in her head, the way his voice had barely carried over the hum of the neon lights. "You stayed past midnight." She shook her head, forcing her grip tighter around the steering wheel. The memory of that thing in her passenger seat, her face, her smile, was burned into her brain. It wasn't possible. It couldn't have been real. But the sinking feeling in her gut told her otherwise. She checked the time. 3:12 a.m. A laugh nearly bubbled out of her throat, dry and hysterical. That wasn't possible either. She had left the gas station hours ago. The desert highway should have led her straight into a town, a motel, civilization. But there was nothing. Just the road. Just the dark. She had no cell service, no GPS, no idea where she was. A pair of headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the night. Relief crashed over her, sudden and violent. She wasn't alone out here. She flashed her brights twice, signaling, but the oncoming car didn't respond. It didn't slow. It didn't move out of the lane. Her relief curdled. The car was heading straight for her. She slammed on the horn, jerking the wheel, her tires screeching against the pavement as she swerved to the side of the road. The car passed her in a blur, its engine roaring like something feral. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she twisted in her seat, watching the red taillights fade into the horizon. Then, without warning, the car flipped. Nina's breath caught in her throat as the vehicle's back tires lifted clean off the road, its entire frame twisting unnaturally. It landed on its roof with a sickening crunch, metal bending, glass shattering. Silence. She sat frozen, her pulse slamming through her veins. Then something moved inside the wreck. A shadow peeled itself from the wreckage, unfurling slowly, unnaturally. Its limbs bent at angles they shouldn't, its head lolling as if struggling to support its weight. And then, it stood upright. Nina's body reacted before her brain did. She threw the car into drive, tires spinning as she fled. She didn't look back. The road was endless. Her gas gauge hovered just above empty. Her stomach twisted in hunger. Her throat was raw from thirst. She hadn't seen a single town, a single sign of life since she left the wreck behind. The night never ended. No sun threatened to rise. The stars above flickered, unfamiliar and wrong. Then she saw it. A motel. A new motel. She nearly sobbed in relief. The vacancy sign glowed red against the blackened sky, and she pulled into the empty lot without hesitation. The building was small, no more than 2 stories, its exterior faded and weather-worn. The neon sign above the entrance read, "Desert Inn Rooms." She climbed out of the car, her legs trembling beneath her. The air smelled strange, too clean, too empty, but she ignored it. Anything was better than the road. The lobby was just as empty as the parking lot. A single overhead light flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. A man stood behind the front desk, his face hidden beneath the brim of a too-low hat. "You've got a room?" she asked, her voice hoarse. The man didn't answer. She licked her lips, shifting uncomfortably. "I just need a place to sleep for a few hours. Do you take cash?" The man finally moved. His hand slid out from beneath the desk, a key resting in his palm. The tag attached read, "Room 6. Her fingers brushed against his as she took it. His skin was ice cold. The hallway was long, too long. Nina's footsteps echoed against the tile as she approached her room. The numbers on the doors weren't in order. Room 4, room 9, room 2. Her grip tightened around the key. She swore she had just passed room 6 a few doors back. Then she saw it. The door was slightly ajar. A chill ran through her. Her instincts screamed at her to turn around, to leave, to run. But there was nowhere else to go. She swallowed the fear rising in her throat and stepped inside. The room was bare. A bed, a nightstand, a single lamp. The air was heavy, pressing against her lungs. She locked the door behind her, double-checking it before collapsing onto the mattress. She just needed to rest. Just for a few hours. Just until morning. Something knocked. Boom, 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 boom. Her eyes snapped open. The room was dark. The knocking came again. Harder this time. Boom, boom, boom. She sat up, her breath coming fast. Who's there? No answer. Her gaze darted to the window. The parking lot was empty. The vacancy sign was still glowing. The front desk man was gone. The knocking didn't come from the door. It came from inside the room. Nina turned her head slowly. The closet door. Boom, boom, boom. Her body locked in place. Something moved behind it. A shadow stretched beneath the doorframe. The doorknob rattled. Then, a whisper, "You should have stayed on the road." A shudder ran down her spine. The closet door burst open. She never saw what was inside, only the hands. Too many hands. They reached for her, grasping, pulling, dragging. Darkness swallowed her whole. Nina woke up, back at the front desk. The man behind the counter stared at her, his expression unreadable. "You stayed past midnight?" he whispered. Her blood turned to ice. Slowly, her gaze drifted toward the wall behind him. The vacancy sign was gone. In its place, written in thick black ink, Yoski. The town of Willow Creek had always been known for its quiet, sleepy existence. A town where nothing happened, where the biggest event was the annual Pumpkin Festival, and where the nights were filled with the comforting hum of cicadas. But that was before the disappearances. It started with a girl named Evelyn Mercer. One evening, she was walking home from her part-time job at the diner, her figure barely visible under the dim glow of the streetlights. The next morning, her parents found her bedroom empty, her window open. There was no sign of a struggle, no forced entry. The only clue was a message scratched into the wooden frame of the window. "He's awake." Days passed, then weeks, and then it happened again. A young boy, barely 10 years old, vanished while riding his bike. His mother swore she had seen him pedaling toward home, but he never arrived. Instead, they found his bicycle lying in the middle of the road, the rubber tires still spinning. Another message was found, this time etched into the asphalt beneath the street lamp. People locked their doors at night. Parents pulled their children inside before sunset. The town, once welcoming and warm, turned into a place of whispered fears and closed curtains. And yet, no one left. It was as if an invisible force held them in place, preventing them from escaping. Then, one evening, James Holloway, a young journalist passing through town, stopped at the gas station to refuel. He noticed something strange. The attendant refused to meet his eyes as he handed back the change. There was a stiffness in his movements, a nervous tremble in his hands. "Then from around here, are you?" the attendant muttered. James shook his head, "Just passing through." The man hesitated, then leaned in slightly, whispering, "Then don't stay past sundown." James laughed. "Why not?" The man's gaze darted to the window. The sun was already dipping below the tree line. "Because she doesn't like strangers?" That night, James checked into the only motel in town. He was intrigued by the rumors, by the way the people acted like something lurked just outside their periphery. He wanted to know more. His room was small, musty, and smelled faintly of something damp, but he was too tired to care. He set up his laptop, intending to jot down some notes about the town. As he typed, a notification popped up. New message received. He frowned. He hadn't connected to the internet. The message had no sender. It simply read, "Don't look at her." James exhaled sharply, shaking his head. A prank? Had to be. Maybe someone at the gas station was messing with him. But when he closed his laptop, something changed. The air in the room felt heavier. The lights flickered. The old, boxy television in the corner switched on by itself, crackling with static. A shape moved within the screen. James's breath hitched. The static rippled, forming the shape of a woman. Tall, impossibly thin, with long, wet hair clinging to her face. She tilted her head, her eyes pure black voids, her mouth a stretched, jagged slit. And then she turned her head toward him. The TV went black. A knock came at the door. Boom, boom, boom. James's entire body froze. He hadn't heard footsteps approaching. The hallway outside had been empty. He stood, his heart hammering against his ribs. The knocking came again. Boom, boom, boom. Slow, deliberate. His hand trembled as he reached for the door, but then his phone buzzed. Another message? Do not open. His blood ran cold. The knocking didn't stop. In fact, it moved, shifting along the walls as if whatever was outside was circling the room. The window, the bathroom door, the ceiling. Then whispers. A voice right beside his ear. "Look at me." James ran for the door, throwing it open, bolting into the hallway. He didn't look back. Outside, the town was silent. No wind, no crickets, just the motel sign flickering in the distance. And then he saw them, the townspeople, standing perfectly still in the middle of the road, their eyes black and empty, their mouths stretched into wide, unnatural grins. And behind them, standing at the edge of the street lamp's glow, she was there, tall, unmoving, watching. James couldn't breathe. And then she moved, a single step forward. The light above flickered. Another step. A sound slithered through the air, like bones snapping, like flesh stretching. James turned to run, but his legs wouldn't move. Another message appeared on his phone. Too late. She lunged. James screamed. And then darkness. The next morning, the motel room was empty. The bed was untouched. The only sign he had ever been there was his car, still parked outside, his keys in the ignition. And a single message scratched into the motel's wooden door. "She's awake." The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with the scent of something rotten. Thomas stood at the edge of the abandoned highway, his breath shallow as he stared into the dense forest that stretched beyond the cracked asphalt. He hadn't meant to come back, not here, not to this place where the memories were stitched into the very earth. But something had called him, a whisper in the wind, a name spoken in the static of his radio, a shadow in his dreams. He took a hesitant step forward, the dirt soft beneath his boots, the trees loomed overhead, their branches curling like skeletal fingers. He knew he should turn back. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to leave, but he couldn't, not after what he had seen last night. A reflection? Not in a mirror, not in water, but in the black, empty space of his bedroom. It had stood there, where no shadow should be, watching. And then it had whispered, "You forgot me." The voice had been cold, brittle, familiar. It had been his own. Now, standing at the edge of the forest, Thomas felt that same cold breath against his skin. He knew the rules. Never look back. Never answer the whispers. Never step beyond the old road. But the rules didn't matter anymore. He had already broken them. The trees swallowed him whole. The deeper he walked, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, only the sound of his own heartbeat, a steady drum in the silence. He gripped the flashlight in his pocket, but he didn't turn it on. Something told him not to. The light wouldn't help. Not here. Then he saw it. A house. It shouldn't have been there. Not in the middle of the forest. Not after all these years. But there it was. Standing tall. Rotten wood, broken windows, the door slightly ajar as if it had been expecting him. He had been here before. Or rather, he had left something here. His fingers brushed against the old scar on his wrist, the faint memory of blood against wood he had tried to forget, had forced himself to believe it had been a dream. But dreams didn't leave scars. Thomas stepped inside. The floor groaned beneath his weight. Dust clung to the air, thick and suffocating. The house smelled of wet earth and something sour. Like meat left to rot in the sun. He moved through the hallway, his breath tight in his chest. The walls were covered in scratches, deep claw marks that ran from floor to ceiling. Some looked fresh. Then, in the distance, footsteps. Not his. Slow, deliberate. Coming closer, he turned the corner, his hands shaking, his pulse thundering in his ears. A mirror stood at the end of the hall, and in its reflection, not his own. The figure was tall, twisted, its arms too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, its face wrong. The features stretched, the mouth too wide, the eyes black pits of nothingness. And then it moved. Not in the mirror, in the hall. Thomas staggered back, his mind screaming, his body frozen. The figure stepped forward, each movement jagged, unnatural, its mouth stretched into something like a smile. "You forgot me," it whispered again. Thomas turned and ran. The walls stretched as he moved, the hall growing longer, the door impossibly far. His breath came in ragged gasps, his feet barely touching the ground. Then laughter. Not from behind, from everywhere. The walls trembled, the house shuddering like something alive. Shadows bled from the floor, crawling toward him, reaching. The door slammed shut before he could reach it. Darkness swallowed him whole, and in the pitch black, something cold touched his face. "You can't leave me again," the voice whispered. Then, and the slow, steady sound of knocking. Boom, 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 from inside his own chest. In the heart of the Midwest, where endless cornfields stretch as far as the eye can see, lies the small, isolated town of Millfield. The town is known for its annual harvest festival, a time of celebration and gratitude for the bountiful crops. But beneath the surface of this seemingly idyllic community lies a dark and ancient secret, one that has been buried for centuries. A group of 5 friends. Liam, a curious and adventurous college student. Ava, a skeptical but open-minded journalist. Ethan, a pragmatic and logical engineer. Maya, an empathetic and intuitive artist. And Noah, a charismatic and daring musician. Decide to visit Millfield during the Harvest Festival. They are drawn by the promise of a unique cultural experience and the opportunity to escape the hustle and bustle of city life. As they arrive in Millfield, they are struck by the town's quaint charm. The streets are lined with colorful banners and the air is filled with the scent of freshly baked pies and roasted corn. The townsfolk greet them with warm smiles and open arms, inviting them to join in the festivities. The friends settle into a cozy bed and breakfast run by a friendly elderly couple. The inn is filled with rustic charm, with creaky wooden floors and floral wallpaper. As they unpack, they notice a peculiar symbol carved into the headboard of the bed. It is a circle with a star inside, and it seems to pulse with a faint, otherworldly energy. Intrigued, Ava asks the innkeeper about the symbol. The old woman hesitates, her smile faltering for a moment. "It's just a family heirloom," she says, her voice tinged with a hint of unease. "Nothing to worry about." But her eyes tell a different story. That evening, the friends join the townsfolk in the town square for the opening of the Harvest Festival. The atmosphere is jovial, with music, dancing, and laughter filling the air. But as the sun sets, a strange ritual begins. The townsfolk gather around a large, ancient stone altar, their faces solemn and reverent. The ritual involves the sacrifice of a lamb, its blood spilled onto the altar. The friends watch in shock and disbelief, their initial amusement turning to unease. The townsfolk chant in a language they don't understand, their voices rising and falling in a hypnotic rhythm. As the ritual reaches its climax, the sky darkens and a strange, otherworldly energy fills the air. The friends feel a chill run down their spines, and they sense a presence, something ancient and malevolent, watching them from the shadows. The ritual ends and the townsfolk disperse, leaving the friends alone in the square. They exchange worried glances, their earlier excitement replaced by a sense of foreboding. The next day, the friends decide to explore the town and uncover the truth behind the ritual. They visit the local library, where they discover old newspaper articles and diaries that speak of the Harvest Festival and its origins. They learn that the festival is a modern-day incarnation of an ancient pagan ceremony, one that dates back to the time of the first settlers. The articles describe the ritual as a way to appease the harvest god, a deity that demands sacrifice in exchange for bountiful crops. The friends are horrified to learn that the sacrifices were not always animals, but sometimes humans. As they delve deeper into the town's history, the friends uncover a pattern of disappearances and strange occurrences that coincide with the Harvest Festival. They realize that the ritual is not just a relic of the past, but a living tradition that continues to this day. The friends also learn that the symbol they saw in the bed and breakfast is a ward, a protection against the malevolent force that is summoned during the ritual. They begin to suspect that the townsfolk are not just participants, but captives, bound by a centuries-old, determined to expose the truth. The friends decide to confront the town's elders. They gather evidence and prepare to reveal the dark secret of Millfield to the world. But as they do so, they realize that the force they are dealing with is more powerful and more dangerous than they ever imagined. The friends are warned by a mysterious stranger, a man who claims to have escaped the town's clutches. He tells them that the harvest god is real and that it demands a sacrifice every year. The friends are faced with a choice: leave the town and abandon the townsfolk to their fate, or stay and try to break the cycle of suffering. With courage and determination, the friends decide to stay and fight. They devise a plan to disrupt the ritual and free the town from the grip of the harvest god. They use their unique strengths and abilities, each one contributing to the plan in their own way. Liam's adventurous spirit and knowledge of history guide them. Ava's journalism skills help them gather evidence and expose the truth. Ethan's engineering skills allow them to manipulate the environment. Maya's art captures the essence of the town and its secrets. Noah's charisma and daring help them rally the townsfolk to their cause. In the end, the friends succeed in disrupting the ritual and breaking the curse. The harvest god is banished, and the town of Millfield is freed from its ancient bondage. The friends leave the town, forever changed by their experience. They have faced the darkness and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. As they drive away, they know that they will never forget the terror and the wonder of Millfield. But they also know that they have made a difference, and that they have helped to free a community from the grip of a centuries-old nightmare. After their harrowing experience in Millfield, Liam, Ava, Ethan, Maya, and Noah tried to return to their normal lives. They had broken the curse of the harvest god and freed the town from its ancient bondage. But the memories of that night haunted them, creeping into their thoughts and dreams, a constant reminder of the darkness they had faced. Months passed, and the friends tried to move on. They went their separate ways, each one hoping to find some semblance of peace. But the experience had left its mark on them, a lingering sense of unease that refused to fade. Liam, the adventurous college student, found himself drawn to the study of ancient religions and cults. He spent countless hours in the library, poring over texts and manuscripts, searching for answers. But the more he learned, the more he realized that there were forces in the world that defied explanation, forces that were beyond human understanding. Ava, the journalist, tried to write an expose on the events in Millfield. But every time she sat down to write, she felt a strange resistance, as if some unseen force was preventing her from revealing the truth. Her dreams were filled with visions of the harvest god, its eyes filled with malevolence and hunger. Ethan, the engineer, tried to rationalize his experience. He threw himself into his work, hoping to find solace in logic and reason. But the more he analyzed the events in Millfield, the more he realized that there were things that could not be explained by science alone. His sleep was plagued by nightmares, and he often woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. Maya, the artist, found her work taking on a dark and disturbing quality. Her paintings were filled with twisted figures and otherworldly landscapes, as if the horrors of Millfield had seeped into her art. Her dreams were filled with visions of the harvest god and the souls it had claimed, and she often felt a malevolent presence in her studio. Noah, the musician, tried to channel his experiences into his music. He composed haunting melodies and lyrics that spoke of the darkness and despair he had felt in Millfield. But his music began to take on a life of its own, affecting those who listened in unexpected and unsettling ways. The friends were brought together again by a shared sense of foreboding. They gathered at a remote cabin in the woods, a place where they hoped to find some solace and clarity. As they sat around the fireplace, they shared their experiences, each one more bizarre and terrifying than the last. Liam spoke of the ancient texts he had discovered, texts that spoke of the harvest god and other malevolent deities. He had learned that the harvest god was not a singular entity, but part of a pantheon of dark gods that had been worshipped by ancient civilizations. Ava shared her struggles with writing the exposé and the strange resistance she had encountered. She had begun to suspect that the force that had protected Millfield for centuries was still at work, preventing the truth from being revealed. Ethan described the nightmares that plagued him and the sense of dread that followed him everywhere he went. He had begun to experience strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, and shadows flitting across his vision. Maya showed the group her paintings, and the friends were both captivated and disturbed by her work. The images were filled with twisted figures and otherworldly landscapes, as if the other realm had seeped into her art. Noel played them the music he had composed, and the friends were both moved and unsettled by the haunting melodies. The songs seemed to resonate with something deep within them, stirring emotions and memories that they had tried to forget. As the friends discussed their experiences, they realized that the harvest god was not the only threat they had to contend with. They began to experience strange occurrences, as if the other realm was closing in on them. Liam found himself drawn to an ancient stone circle deep in the woods. The air around the circle was charged with energy, and he felt a pull, a force, drawing him towards the center. Ava began to see visions of the other realm, glimpses of the twisted landscape and its monstrous inhabitants. She felt a presence near her, a shadow that seemed to watch her every move. Ethan experienced more strange occurrences, objects moving on their own and shadows flitting across his vision. He felt a presence in his room, a malevolent force that seemed to be growing stronger. Maya's paintings took on a life of their own, the figures in the images stepping out of the paintings and into the real world. Her dreams were filled with visions of the harvest god, and she felt a pull, a force, drawing her back to Millfield. Noah's music began to affect those around him in more disturbing ways, driving some to madness and others to despair. He felt a presence in his studio, a shadow that seemed to watch him as he worked. The friends realized that they had to confront the other realm once again if they were to have any hope of escaping its grasp. They returned to Millfield, hoping to find answers and a way to break the connection that bound them to the harvest god. As they arrived in the town, they were greeted by a sight that chilled them to the bone. The town was in chaos, the streets filled with twisted figures and otherworldly creatures. The air was thick with the scent of decay and despair. The friends made their way to the center of the town, where the ancient stone altar stood. The altar pulsed with a malevolent energy, and the air was filled with the screams of the damned. The friends stood together, determined to face the abyss once more. They used their unique strengths and abilities, each one supporting the others in their darkest moments. They confronted the malevolent force that controlled the other realm, and they fought with everything they had. In the end, the friends emerged victorious, the connection to the other realm severed, and the harvest god banished back to the depths of the abyss. The town of Millfield was restored to its former state, and the friends were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. They had faced the abyss and survived, but they knew that they would never be the same. The experience had changed them, leaving them with a bond forged in the crucible of adversity and a strength that they never knew they had. As they left Millfield, they vowed to keep the memory of the harvest god alive, to warn others of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. They had learned that the god was not just a deity, but a living entity, a force of chaos and destruction. The friends returned to their lives, but they knew that they would always be connected by the shared experience of the abyss. They had faced their fears and emerged stronger, their friendship a testament to the power of unity and the resilience of the human spirit.